I don't think many Labour MPs, even those sitting for rural seats, have a rural background. I think Labour is essentially an urban party, and I think that is part of the problem. I mean, I think any sane person agrees that this country needs a lot more renewable energy, and most of that is going to come from wind farms and solar farms. And I'm just wondering, from what you're saying about, the fact that it seems that government policies are running down the amount of acreage that we're devoting to agriculture, as to whether there is a hidden agenda that, if you can get farmers to sell up, there's actually a lot more land available that you can put turbines on, or you can put solar panels on.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's disaster capitalism. Yeah. The Labour government are dressing this up as something that is left wing, when in fact it's not, it's right wing. It's disaster capitalism. It's delivering, we've had a series of shocks, and it's delivering another economic shock on an already beleaguered system. And I do, as I said, I'm very pro solar. They're putting a lot of wind power into the sea as well, but they need to put the money into the grid, because the grid is full, and you can't put panels everywhere if the grid doesn't have the capacity. So none of that makes any joined up thinking. And the other reason for going back to the European Union is, we've left all of the benefits, we've lost all the benefits of being in the EU around the energy tariffs, which is why we're paying the highest electricity prices in the world, thanks to Brexit. So Keir Starmer could immediately address our energy issues by actually getting rid of these stupid red lines. I don't know if you saw, I did tweet it today. A Labour peer was on GB News saying that we should do a deal with Trump and that Brexit is marvellous. And this is what I suppose we haven't really seen. We thought that with Corbyn going, the Brexit caucus had gone from Labour, but it doesn't seem as though that's the case. It's ideology is trumping proper, joined up, sensible, cohesive thinking, and that's frightening. We took back control, and we've absolutely lost control.
The questions about solar farms being built on agricultural land. How does this fit in with the Labour government's farming and green energy? Which should be prioritised?
We've got a finite amount of land, and in some ways, if a farm has a solar farm at the centre of it, it's a good way of, it's a secure income. It can be a good way of continuing to subsidise your farm. But we're now into the point where there's not really any money in farming. So investors are buying land, large swathes of land, or leasing large swathes of land from landowners to put in enormous solar panel fields. Look, I don't mind them. I think I don't mind so people say they think they're ghastly. I don't think they're, I don't think they're bad. They're not bad for the environment because they don't do anything. I just don't know if it's the best use of land, when they could perhaps put them on, if we had like they have on the continent, they put them in between the the reservation zone on the motorway, they put them on roofs of car parks, blah, 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 all those sort of things. But it is a symptom of the running down of food production that this is bubbling up. And the other challenge to the solar industry and the wind industry is the grid is in such a bad condition when it needs upgrading, which the Labour government keep talking about. But if they were going to do that, I don't know why the hell they've decided to get bogged down by having a fight with farmers. Because I'm pro green energy, I'm pro all of those things that we need. And I accept that we need food imports. For me, if you wanted to do a Brexit, you needed to really secure your domestic production. And make sure you've got some sustenance there, but to let everything go, it makes no sense. But if you want to get rid of your land for farming or shrink it right down, you're better off to stay in Europe because you've got food security in Europe. We will not have food security with someone like Donald Trump because he can change his mind in a second. You know, when he got into power last time, he pulled out of CPTPP. And that's what he will do. He one week he'll say, I'll send you food over, and the next week he won't. So all of these decisions, I don't think, are being made properly. I'm very worried about how these decisions are being made because I can only see us getting to a crisis point, and having a lot of food shortages. For instance, the last government allowed 2 big lettuce growers to crash, lost them. So now with the weather getting colder, we're going to have a shortage of fruits and salads and tomatoes and peppers because of the flooding in Spain and Morocco. We're heavily reliant on those areas for food. So if you're importing food, every time there's a climate incident somewhere else, then we're at risk. So even if you put without the war in Ukraine into all of this, it's a heavily risky strategy. And if I was Prime Minister, I mean, I wish I was in some ways, because it just gives me anxiety thinking that I don't think anyone's really thinking properly about the need for food because they've taken it for granted. And the supermarkets say, oh, yes, we can do it. But supermarkets aren't fine. They're just used to going out and wheeler dealing. But when there's a shortage, and I think we're about to see those shortages very, very soon, then you're going to start to see panic, and it doesn't take long for that to bubble up. And exactly this happened in Sri Lanka, as I mentioned earlier.
I just wanted you to talk a little more about something you mentioned, which I was vaguely aware of, but I don't know the details about apples and soft fruit. You mentioned that what has been a disaster for apples and soft fruit. I guess it's related to what you were saying about lettuce, but.
Yeah, the fruit sector and the vegetable sector, because when you think about it, when you grow a cow, when you grow a steak, it takes from the time that the cow is conceived, it takes several years for that to materialize on the shelves. Whereas when you grow something from seed, that's a vegetable or fruit, or I know fruit grows on trees as well, it's a short cycle. So it's a different way of it's a different system of farming, and they've got different cost pressures. So what's been going on with the fruit and vegetable sector only shows us what will happen to the meat sector, as I described, because the trade deals that they've sorted out are every year the quotas ratchet up for imports until in 15 years it's unlimited. They can send anything they want. And the biggest danger to us actually is South America, because they produce enormous amounts of meat in Brazil and Argentina. And Australia is expanding its feedlot system as well. They started doing that with Brexit. So what we've seen in the fruit, salad and vegetable sector is Brexit opening up opportunity for European imports in particular to come in and undercut British food. And so farmers have decided that it's just not profitable to grow it anymore. So the Lee Valley growers, the greenhouse growers in Essex, have largely given up growing cucumbers, tomatoes, peppers, because it's just not financially viable. And that takes you back to Minford. That's what he said. You have to run it down. He talked about compensation. I mean, in my view, the compensation is the arms scheme. And that is what they've done to every sector. And the pig sector has faced that. But what they've done is replaced those pig numbers with factories. It is difficult when you you don't know about farming, and you just, unless you've got a vegetable patch and you grow something, you don't, it's difficult to think about it all collectively, and trying to explain it sometimes is hard, but hopefully I'm getting you to see why I'm anxious about it.
We've got a question in the chat about, how can we publicize your information and arguments?
Well, social media, and at the moment on Twitter in particular, I've got a lot of people just coming at us with because the government, I mean, this is what I'm really upset about. The government have used false data. They've used death rates for the year 21-22 to work out who would have paid inheritance tax in that year. And I just think that's a really unscientific way of looking at it, because DEFRA knows all about who does what and what we produce, and absolutely they know everything about it. So that is in itself should raise suspicions. But there are people who are registered at farms who don't farm food. They're wealthy people that live in a house with a few acres, that they might have a pony in it, or they might just grow a bit of grass and let someone graze some sheep on it. It's those people that are not farming are also included in our stats. There is a way the government can get around this. They can exempt landowners who are farming and in earning most of their income from farming. So there is a solution to it, and I was on LBC earlier, and I've put it on Times Radio and other places. So it is a matter of sort of saying, well, why don't you do this? Because at the moment, everybody on Twitter seems to be furiously angry with Clarkson and Dyson. Now, I seriously disagree with Dyson on Brexit, but I cannot criticise what he's done with his farms. He's employing people, he's farming sustainably, he's developed the farms that he's developed, and it's not a great return for his investment, because farming is, as you know, I've told you, is not great. So he's contributing to the food system. So I can't criticise him for that. And with Clarkson, he did vote Remain, although a lot of people think he voted Brexit. He is actually an ardent Remainer. He's been a great advocate for farming because he's taken the farm to the living room so that people understand what the problems are. So at the moment, a lot of people sort of say they want this to come through because they want Dyson and Clarkson to pay. It's another Brexit situation, but I've got pro-Europeans with, the pro-EU flags on their accounts arguing for Brexit. And it's an absolute mad situation, in that I was sort of saying, you're supporting this happening to farming, and it means the delivery of the trade deal, and it means the destruction of farming, which is the principal reason for Brexit, because they want better services with America. They want to have the trade deal with America for better services. And then it means America flooding us with goods, because we can't get through the tariff war with Europe with those low standards. That's the situation that we're in.
I've got one question in the chat about the focus of the farmers' campaign. Are the farmers and NFU going to put more pressure on the government to think again about the single market and customs union, rather than just campaigning on inheritance tax?
It's really hard for the NFU. They don't want to talk about Brexit. I know Tom Bradshaw. He used to be part of our campaign group. He is an ardent Remainer. But they just don't want to get into the weeds of arguing about something which they feel is a political matter for the government, not them. And they feel that whatever the government decide, they have to try and weather the storm of it, apart from obviously this is a straw too far. It is a very uncomfortable situation, as I've said, in that we've got Nigel Farage and others who in effect are arsonists. It's like, Brexit was a fire and Nigel Farage started it, and he's the arsonist. And here he is now on the stage with the very victims of Brexit, saying that he cares about farming. I mean, he doesn't give a damn about it, and so it is a very uncomfortable. And it's just so stupid of the Labour government to get themselves into this trap. It doesn't make any sense to me, unless they want to sort of say, oh, we've done our bit and we're going to hand it over to you now. It makes no sense. It's only building Nigel Farage's platform, and that in itself is a very scary reality. None of us want to see that happen, and I can't believe that the Labour government have been so daft. But that's where we are. We obviously are a Remain group, and I always talk about Brexit. I don't ever stop talking about Brexit. If you follow me on YouTube, you'll see that most of my videos mention Brexit, because I understand the basics of it. But all we can do is keep communicating and try and getting people to understand. I was really encouraged by Andrew Bailey's intervention last week. And business is, because it's not just the inheritance tax for farms, the assault on business in this budget is enormous. I spoke to one farmer who he's a raspberry grower who, in fact, he was on Times Radio this morning. If you listen back to 7:10 this morning, you'll hear it. It's really worth listening to. His wages bill for next year is going to be £4.25 million more because of this budget. And that gives you an sort of understanding of where we are. This government are attacking SMEs, and the only beneficiaries of that are big multinational corporations. They're creating a fire sale. It's in many ways not that different to Liz Truss. It's just a sort of slower burn thing. And it's been packaged slightly differently in that they're saying, oh, we're going to pay public sector workers. But this, as I said, if one grower has got to find 4.25 million more for next year, that means food inflation. Whichever way you look at it, it's more inflation. So the pay rise that everyone's had is going to be eaten away by the inflation again. And this is not a solution for us long term, when all the government have to do is actually get rid of Brexit, and immediately we would have growth back. And most of the businesses in this country, that is exactly what they want. So we have to join together and build on. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I'm very uncomfortable about campaigning with the people that brought us Brexit. But if I have to use them to get rid of Brexit, that's what I will do. So we have to stand together against this and fight against it and put pressure on this government, because what we need is for Starmer to give in and say, okay, we're going back to the EU. And this particular issue has the potential to do that. So we have to swallow our pride, not be tribal, and actually just keep pushing through and say, actually, yeah, a clock is right twice a day. It's that. And definitely the Conservatives are on message. They're saying the right things. They're giving the right data. It is the Labour government who are deceiving the public, which is very depressing. And I expected a lot more of them.
I'd been reading about pro-Brexit groups, far-right groups, essentially trying to hijack these protests. And that's how The Guardian have described it in an article that was written in the course of this talk, actually, or published in the course of this talk. So I was sort of worried is that even though there is broad agreement on this issue, that people are missing the broader points around Brexit and farming. Is that a worry? And is it a worry that these groups are going to make, if they are missing the wider point, make that a hell of a lot worse?
Well, we've got the answer from what happened in Holland with the farming protest, that it was hijacked by the far right, and they did benefit from it in the elections, if you remember. And it is a danger, as I said. I wish I could have a row with Keir Starmer and others and just say, why would you do this? In fact, I have messaged Daniel Seitner, because he's been to many of our events, so I do have a line of communication with him. As in, I said to him, I didn't want another Conservative government, but it seems you do. Why would you do this? It's idiotic. So I guess the Labour government think they're going to, they might be able to push through this and ride through to the next election. They won't. People won't forget this. And so, I can't do any more than, I can't ignore this issue, and you can't let the far right completely own it to themselves. So they will have the thing on Tuesday, and there will be more events. We're planning events from Save British Farming, and further things will go through. And we know, and I know, if we manage to scotch this, then they're going to really be under pressure to sort of go, well, we've got to do a deal with the EU. Trump is trying to hold them to ransom, because he's saying he's going to challenge the Chagos deal and all of those sort of things. So undoubtedly, there's a lot of pressure going on here, because Trump and the far right in America, it's not Britain they want to use us to get into the European Union and break the single market, as I've said. And that is not in any of our interests, because it will end up in, once you start in a splintering of the EU, we know why we've had peace, for however many years it is, 80 years. It's because of the European Union is a peace project. And we are directly impacted by any decisions on that front. So even if, from my perspective, there are farmers who believed in Brexit, who I know, who think that I'm crazy because I was against Brexit. On this issue, I'm prepared to sort of say, let's campaign on this. And then as they're campaigning on it, hopefully they will think a bit deeper about this and why Brexit isn't right. And one particular farmer, that I mentioned, Tim Chambers, I spoke to him today. He voted Brexit because he thought it was going to make things better. And he admitted today that he regrets it. So with every person that regrets Brexit and accepts that, then that means we are still making progress, even though Nigel Farage is making a big noise about it. But what we need is for the Labour government to start offering a vision instead of continuing what looks a bit like George Osborne Mark II, but probably quite clunky and not even not even as good as they were, and they weren't very good. So they need to rise to the challenge and start doing what their base want and their voters want. We know the majority of Labour voters are pro-European, and Keir Starmer is going about it backwards. And the MPs within the Labour Party need, if Starmer's not going to change direction, they need to push him off the blinking fence. Get rid of him, and get somebody in like Andy Burnham or something who is pro-European. And I really would be interested to have a chat with Sadiq Khan, because, it's really difficult for him. Trump is a real problem, and I can't imagine how he's going to stay silent if Starmer does continue down this line of a trade deal with Donald Trump. It's just, who would ever believe that we could end up in a situation where a Labour government does a trade deal with a demagogue like Donald Trump? It defies belief. It defies belief that I'm even saying this. But we are where we are. But I think we have to be savvy and wise. Don't let tribalism blinker your ability to campaign. We're all people. The more united Britain is, the easier it is to fight this offensive. And it's not just us in Britain, in Europe. I speak to lots of European journalists, and things are fractious over there as well. So we have to, when we're embedded in tribes, we're divided, and that gives them opportunity to rule over us. So the more united we are, the better. And so that's what I try and do. And I've always, from the time we started Save British Farming, we use the Union Jack flag. We always try to discourage the European flag for that very reason, as in, let's reclaim our identity back through what is a European system. The farming system that we have is the central core founding policy of the European Union. And so if a farmer voted for Brexit, or if somebody who enjoys, the values around socialism, the welfare state, they're not really understanding why they voted Brexit. They're just voting in a protest against a scapegoat that they've been misled to blame. And that's the reality of it. So we need to unite as much as we can and not sort of do that, you're a Brexiter, so I'm not talking to you. It is hard on Twitter and social media because you don't know who they are. Some of them are probably bots, and it can be a waste of your time. But if you can engage with people and encourage them to understand these things, that will help. I do believe empty shells are going to focus minds as well. So whilst I don't want to see chaos, in many ways, I think it might be a positive thing in the short term.